You are listening to the Bright Life Podcast, all about ways to stay inspired, chase your dreams, and find more gratitude in the highs and lows of the journey. I'm your host, Jessica Johnson. I'm a business owner, a part-time digital nomad, a self-growth junkie, a believer in other big-hearted women, and am all about sharing tips, tricks, lessons learned, and encouragement so we can all live our biggest, brightest lives. You ready? Let's do this. Hi, gorgeous. Welcome to today's episode. This episode is around one of the questions that I receive often from listeners, and that's around how to define your own idea for a creative project like a book or a podcast. So if you've ever thought to yourself, I feel like there's something in my heart I want to share. I just don't know what it is. Maybe you want to write a book. Maybe you want to start a podcast one day. Maybe you have ideas for poetry or anything else like that. I want to share some ideas around how you can practically get clear on what your unique idea could be for that book or for that podcast so that you can move forward with bringing into the world your very important message and perspective. Because the truth is, we all have something to share. We all have things that we have gone through. We have unique ways of looking at things. There is something that you do and you don't even realize, or that you've been through and you have forgotten the ways in which you went through it, that could really help someone else. And that will feel like this magic formula or epiphany for someone else that you may not even realize yourself because you're so close to it or you've gone through it for so many years. So today I kind of want to dust off those things that you may not even realize are your unique idea, are the message that you can bring forward into the world to help others and to grow a community and to grow a business or whatever you dream of. Okay, so these are the exact same ideas and processes that I use to come up with my book, which is called Your Bright Life. Get clear on what you want, overcome self-doubt, and bring your dreams to life. Because maybe like you, I had dreams for a long, long time to be an author. I knew since a young age that I wanted to one day write a book, but I wasn't exactly sure what it would be about. And so a few years ago, I got really serious on feeling like it was the time to write the book and figure out what it would be about. And here's how this idea came apart that I think you and anyone else you know could use as well. I'm going to share 3 kind of ideas. So the first one is, what's something that you have gone through in your life? I kind of touched on this on a recent episode where I shared a perspective around discomfort and how the thing that you're struggling with or frustrated by could be the thing that you one day know enough about and have gotten through and can then teach and shed some light on for others. So think about the things that you have gone through and learned in your life. You know, maybe when you were younger, you endured bullying. Maybe you had to really grow your self-confidence in your body. Maybe you had to find your own balance with food or with healthy living. Maybe you had to figure out how to find your passion. I mean, that's what my story and my book was born out of, is for years trying to figure out what's that thing that lights me up, that I can share with others, that I can make a difference with, that I can bring into the world as my own boss. And so for you, there was probably something that you have gone through in your own life that is actually not just this struggle that only you have gone through, but that someone else is probably enduring right now and is probably in that exact same position that you were in at one point. And by you writing this book or sharing this podcast, you could really help them. So the first thing is to think through, like, what have you gone through? And if there's a few topics that come to mind throughout your life, maybe jot down what some things could be. Then under each of those bigger buckets, write down the ways you navigated that. So if you had to build your own confidence, what are the ways that you did that? Each of those could be a chapter where you're sharing to someone else how, in order to grow your confidence, you needed to create better self-talk. Okay, so what is self-talk? How does someone go about that? What kinds of things would they say to themselves? What other kinds of self-talk pops up? How do you get around that? That's a whole chapter of a book. And so you could apply that same process for every single method you use to overcome your particular challenge. And that's a book right there. So spend some time and jot down what are some things that you've gone through and how did you get through them? Because that challenge right there could be your legacy, could be your story, and you may not even have realized it. Pretty cool, right? Another idea is, what kind of topic do you want to build a community around? So I've talked to women who are passionate and want to build communities around things like being child-free on one side. I've talked to women recently who want to build communities around women and mothers who have disabled children on another side. You could be passionate about animal welfare. You could have a faith that means a lot to you. Is there anything in the world that you wish you could have more of a community around? Because that could be your podcast or book. Because what happens inevitably when you create these things and you step forward as someone who wants to talk about this and help people with this, is people are drawn to you within that exact community. So all of a sudden, just by putting yourself out there and saying, let's have a conversation about this, I'm willing to lead the charge, you are naturally going to get women gravitating towards you and back to you who also want to have those conversations and want to talk about that thing. So what do you wish you had a community around? Even if it's something like making adult friendships, right? Like that could be something where you're like, hey, I'm a woman looking for more friendships. I'm no longer in college. Like I no longer have the same sports teams I used to. I just want to meet friends and do so online or do so and make it a lot easier for everyone. So that could be your great book. That could be your great podcast and message you put forth. And all of a sudden you're going to find women who resonate with that and who come forward and who grow your community with you around building beautiful female friendships in adulthood. So that's the second one, would be, what do you want to build a community around? And the first one would be, what's something that you have struggled with, that you've gone through, you've learned, and you could translate into lessons in a book or a podcast. The third idea is, what do you have a process around? So, for example, maybe you are amazing with interior design and DIY for home projects, and you can systematically go through every room in a house and see either how to organize it or how to make it beautiful on a budget or how to infuse your own personality and design into it. These are things that not every single person intuitively knows how to do. So you may not even realize that you have a natural gift for something that most people don't, but they would really love to know like what your inside process is. And again, each of those things could be a chapter. So for example, maybe your book could be your process, and each chapter is another step where you walk into a home. What's the first thing that you look for? How does someone define their home style, their dream style, where they're going to feel so luxurious and comfortable, or even define the words that they want to feel when they're in a home? Maybe then once you have that, you transition into finding fabrics or textures or colors that represent that. Maybe then you have a system for where to find those kinds of textures and colors in furniture. Each one of those could be a step and could be a chapter that you may know a lot about and you could write a whole chapter on, but the average person just doesn't get. So that would be what I'd look at for something like, what do you have a process around? It could even be something like, maybe you have a really healthy, happy marriage. How did you build that? Like, what were the things that you did? What are your habits? What are the ways you talk to each other? What are the thoughts that you each think about yourselves? Like, what are the boundaries you have in place? All of those could be chapters that then help someone, whether it's as a book, whether it's episodes for a podcast. What's your process? And that could be your message. There's so many ideas around this. Like maybe you homeschool your children, maybe you meal prep, maybe you found a way to make really healthy meals, but in like a little bit of time each week. So all of those processes that you may have implemented into your life and now they feel like clockwork, That could be something that someone else is trying to figure out, and they would love a podcast or a book that could guide them. So those are my kind of 3 ideas. Like, if you have any themes in your life, if you can look back and think, this has always been a persistent thing I've gone through, that could be your message as well. You really have this beautiful opportunity right now in this moment in time. And I love to remind women of this, where I think we have this perfect moment in time. We're born at this fascinating time in history where you can learn anything online, where you can start a podcast in your basement or your closet where the sound is good, and you can reach thousands or millions of other women. You can start a YouTube channel for a very small amount of money, just even with your laptop camera, if you want to just get started that way. You can write from your own home computer and you can self-publish. You can, of course, go the more traditional publishing route, but there's just so many limitations that have been removed right now. You can get access to so much more than you've ever been able to. And so if you are sitting there with this message or with this little voice inside that said, I've always wanted to talk about this. I've always wished there was a community around this, or I really struggled with this, and here's what I would have told myself. Just remember that this could be your chance. This could be your message, your book, or your podcast. I'll leave you with one more little mindset nugget, and this is something that I always remind students in my copywriter content writing program, where they learn to build their own business as their own boss. But that is that there's so much room in the world for your message. There are billions of people out there, and imagine the feeling of your work going out and impacting even 50 of them. That's like 2 classrooms full of people. Imagine like a few hundred of them. That's like an entire airplane full of people. Imagine it going out and reaching thousands, an auditorium full of people. So if you get that many people buying your book or listening to your podcast, that's a lot of people, and that's a lot of lives impacted. And you putting your message out there, all you had to do was reach a few to really start creating that ripple effect, and you never know what it can become. Maybe you write this book or start this podcast or write this speech, and at first it feels like it's just sharing with a few people at a time, but you never know who's going to hear that podcast or become your next client or listener, and what that can blossom into. So I think sometimes we're given the next little step that we can see in front of us, and this urge on our heart to take this step and to create this thing. And yes, creating is so good, but it's almost even what life will make it beyond that becomes really exciting. Like, this could be your first step into this whole different future, but this is kind of the thing that pulls you into it and first sparks it. So I hope that just encourages some of you or speaks to some of you, and you know who you are. If it's that time for you to create something, feel free to DM me at Hi Jessica Johnson on Instagram. And I'd love to do an episode in the future around mindset things for this. So if you have any fears coming up or things that are blocking you, feel free to shoot me a note, and I'm happy to record you an episode or put them together into an episode that really tackles the things that come up, because it's probably a very common thing that anyone who's creating something has endured and gone through. So happy to share some ideas around that to support you on your journey as well. Okay, I cannot wait to hear what ideas come, and one day, hopefully, to read your book, to be sitting in the audience at your speech, or to put your podcast in my ear as I go on my walk and hear whatever wisdom and light you have to share. Thank you so much for listening in. If you love this episode, I have 2 things you are going to love. One is a free copywriter training full of 5 steps to build a profitable copywriting business as your own boss, no matter how much experience you're starting with. Copywriting is what took me from a 9-to-5 to freedom as my own boss, to travel, choose my schedule, replace my corporate income, and have time to work on creative projects like this podcast. And I'd love to give other women the same opportunity. Another, of course, is my book, Your Bright Life. You can find it on Amazon or Audible, where I narrate the audiobook, so it's kind of like a podcast in book form. All of these things are in the podcast show notes. Thank you again for listening. I appreciate you and your review so much, and I'll see you back here next Thursday.